Hey guys, and welcome to r/NuclearRevenge. Just a heads up, if you hear some screaming in the background of some of the audio, that's just my upstairs neighbor. It's not a big deal, he can't help it. So if you hear screaming and wondering what that is, it's him. He would have made a great meat pie. This goes back to 1986, when I was trying to save enough money to get back to college. I worked at a bar 6 nights a week and was making pretty good money, but in order to save that money for college, I needed a cheap place to live. Fortunately, a couple of friends of mine, Bob and Steve, were spending the last 2 years of college living off campus and needed a roommate for the third bedroom. It came out to about $200 a month with utilities, so I was in. I moved in that August and set myself up in cheap furniture and decor from the local thrift shop. My roommates and I set up some ground rules. Since I was getting home between 4 and 5 in the morning, bringing home a party wasn't going to be an option. And since I was going to be sleeping until 3 in the afternoon, the volume would have to be kept at a low roar. But things went great for us for the first 6 or 7 months that we lived together. Bob was a diligent student who demanded quiet time for studying, and Steve was on the track team and a sports reporter for the local newspaper and had little time for partying. The weekends got a little rowdy sometimes, but the cops never got a noise complaint and our house guests never hit a parked car when they left our house at 5 o'clock Sunday morning, so it was no big deal. That's when the snake came into the Garden of Eden. His name was Franklin. It upset him terribly if you called him Frank, so I only did it when he really pissed me off. He was expelled from college and didn't want to go home to face the wrath of his parents, so he asked if he could crash on our couch for a couple weeks until he got a job in his own place. I was opposed because I would be waking him up every night when I came home, and besides that, I didn't like him. Steve didn't care. He thought that Franklin was a pain in the ass, but he felt sorry for the guy, so he was neutral on the whole subject. Bob was the deciding vote, and he said yes. Franklin moved in on a Wednesday in February, and on Thursday afternoon when I came downstairs for breakfast, he had brought in his Triumph motorcycle and taken it apart in the dining room. The frame was leaning against the wall. The engine and exhaust system were strewn all over the floor, dripping oil on the carpet. I was not quite awake, having not had my coffee, and I politely asked him, "What the F is this?" He replied, "I have to repair it before I get a job. If it's not fixed, then I can't get to work." I shook my head and went for coffee, hoping that Bob would get the security deposit out of Franklin before we kicked him out. A few days later, when I came home from work, Franklin had a large group of friends in the apartment, listening to Led Zeppelin on the stereo at too loud a volume for anyone to get to sleep in the house and drinking my Jack Daniels. I went and grabbed the nearly empty bottle and turned to Franklin. "Frank, what gives you the right to drink this?" I was pissed. "It's in the kitchen. It's communal property, like the soup and the cereal." He looked smug, like he had argued before the Supreme Court and won. "The food and the booze are mine, idiot. I pay for it, I consume it. If you want any of it, then you pay me for it or you buy it for yourself." Again, I was furious. The bottle of Jack was nearly $20, and I had just bought it on Tuesday. It was nearly gone and was supposed to have gotten me through the week. Franklin shrugged as if it were not his concern and went back to entertaining his friends. The next day, I put a padlock on my cabinet. It was only after Bob told me he had to pay rent or move out that he finally went and got a job. And he did that by using my name as a reference at bars that I had relationships with and no desire to hire Franklin as a favor to me. Incidents went on like this for the next few weeks. Some were minor, some were repeats of what he had done before. For example, he invited one of the neighbor's daughters into the apartment for a drink and then proceeded to get her drunk and play strip poker. The girl was only 16 and the father was a member of the National Guard. He would have shot all of us if he had found out what was going on. Franklin had an affinity for firearms and began to sleep with his .38 Special under his pillow on the couch, which allowed him to suddenly wake up with a handgun pointed at whatever startled him. The final straw for me came almost 3 months to the day after he moved in. Bob was slowly noticing that the money that was coming out of the house fund, the money used to pay the utilities, the rent, and miscellaneous bills, was coming up short. I was concerned that we had a house guest that was helping themselves to our cash, and Bob thought it was something else. When Franklin left for a work meeting, we went to his room and searched it, finding a cigar box with several $100s in it, including bills that Bob had marked. Bob had to go back on campus for an advisors meeting and told me not to confront Franklin until he got back, then left for his appointment. Franklin arrived home about 15 minutes after Bob left. My plan was to wait for Bob. I just wanted to play it cool and not do anything stupid. Franklin decided to push my buttons, telling me that his employer was going to give him a raise for doing such an outstanding job as a member of the security team, and I listened to him brag until I couldn't stand it anymore. I casually asked, "Does this mean you'll repay the money you've been stealing from the house, Frank?" He lost all the color to his face and then rushed me from where I sat on the couch. I worked at a bar as a disc jockey that backed up security. I knew a few tricks, and I was a big guy with some decent upper body strength. I was on my feet by the time Franklin got to me, and his plan to hit me in the face was spoiled by me getting on my feet. He he swung and was immediately off balance, which I took advantage of by hitting him in the side of the neck and dropping him to the floor. I was angry. No, I was full of rage. My time at the bar had turned me into an alcohol-dependent madman, and I occasionally lost control of my emotions when I dealt with people who offended me. Franklin had offended me, and I was going to put an end to it. I kicked him a couple of times in the ribs, then grabbed him by the hair and broke his nose. I grabbed him by the ankles and dragged him to the kitchen in front of the stove. I opened the door to the oven, turned the oven onto its highest setting, and then shoved Frank head first into the oven with the intention of gassing him to death. There was only one problem. It was an electric stove. It was the realization that the stove was electric that broke the spell. I hit him a couple of times in the face, realized my heart wasn't in it anymore, and let him go. He went down to his room. I went to my cabinet, got out my jack, and had a drink or two. Bob never questioned me about my assault on Franklin, and Franklin never mentioned it either. The house money was paid back, and the bills were caught up, and all was well again. Franklin moved into a house with a couple of friends about a month after I tried to gas him. I never saw him again except in passing. 30 years later, he friended me on Facebook, and the first thing he mentioned was how funny it seems now that I tried to kill him. He's changed a lot, and so have I, and we chat while keeping it light. So I guess what they say is true. Tragedy plus time equals comedy. When I first read this, I didn't really understand how it was nuclear revenge, but thinking about it, trying to kill someone because they were doing some annoying things, yeah, that counts. The group project fantasy fulfillment of your dreams. I originally posted this on Pro, but got told to post it here instead, and then the post got axed, so here we are. Buckle up, kiddos, because I lived through fantasy fulfillment of the highest kind. Names changed because everyone changes the names for these things, and I don't want to be a black sheep. I won't bore you with the typical group project stuff. It was for a film class, and we were making a short film. Usual insanity happened with everyone showing up late and contributing ideas that would never work, etc., etc. You've all been in a group project before. You know what it's like. The only really important part of all that is to know that this project turned into my baby. I sunk over 30 hours into one grade for an intro to film class that I didn't even need an A on to keep my A in the class. And there was one guy, let's say Keith, who never showed up for anything and listened to music during in-class group time. So we all hated him, obviously. He came up with excuses to miss meetings like, I just forgot I had something else today, and whoops. He promised to get us filming equipment and help us film, so we didn't bother to sign up to rent any good stuff from the school, and then on the day of filming, he hit us with another whoops. So for our low-light film, we scrambled, and all we could get was a crappy camcorder. Keith was our editor, so I sent him all the footage after we shot it. Then I crash. The day it is due, he texts me at about 1 a.m., waking me up. Hey, I was trying to grab everything tonight, and a lot of it was just like pictures or super duper blurry. Couldn't do much with any of it. Could you try sending it again or different? Then, a second later, another text. It's not due tomorrow, right? I scream internally while mentally processing. I simply say, it is due tomorrow, and then we send him the footage. He says he'll get a friend to help him edit it because time crunch. I send him a copy of the script because we shot out of order, so he'll know what order to put things in. The next day in film, we watch the film. No opening credits, some of the dialogue is cut out completely, nothing is in order, and the shot for the end credits is just slapped in the middle of the film and lasts a whole 30 seconds of dead awkward silence. Everyone in the group except Keith has murder on their minds. Keith admits his editing job was crappy. He said it was because he felt rushed from the lack of time, and the teacher gives him 5 extra credit points for honesty. What can you do, am I right? We were all doomed to weep and suffer. Nope. He admits to a fellow groupmate, Michael, that he paid someone else to edit it without sending them the script, and then took credit for it. Oh ho ho! Time for some revenge. The issue is that it's a his word against mine situation, so I scan through the text to see if I can find something to help. Important to note is that I keep records of everything in group projects. If someone misses a meeting, I don't talk to them in person about it. I send them a text and demand an explanation for why, and then explain to them why the meeting they missed was important. I had gotten into a few well-documented arguments with Keith that would, at least, prove he didn't put in equal amounts of work and get him docked. But then, I reread the text between just the two of us, when I was half asleep and just wanting to crash, and he told me that he was going to give the footage to someone else and get them to do it and then just take credit for it. I had just completely misunderstood the message in my sleepy state. We now have the goods. We convince Michael to go to the teacher with it. Well, I don't because Michael hates me, but the other members do. The rest of us join him and I bring my proof. We tell Keith we're going to talk to the teacher about how the group project went down and invite him to join us, just to give him a chance to defend himself. He says he will, but then, whoops, I forgot I had something planned us again. So we tear him apart, with him not present by his own volition, and explain everything. with ample amounts of proof of him being a terrible groupmate, and the teacher's obviously considering failing him on the project. Then I show proof of him plagiarizing the editing. Then Michael pipes up that he paid someone else to do the editing, which is considered a worse offense at my college. The teacher goes quiet, thanks us, and tells us we can leave now and he will take care of it. Next class, no sign of Keith. We were all mentally prepared to have him start screaming at us, because he was very much so an aggressive type of guy. He tried to bully me into letting him get away with inadequacy over text multiple times. But all is quiet. We assume he dropped the class because of a failing grade on a project, or maybe the teacher just flunked him entirely and kicked him out. Whatever. We carry on with our lives watching films and kissing strangers because, college students. However, Michael and Keith are friends on Snapchat. They bonded over hating me during the group project. A true love story. Keith had been silent on stories and on conversations, but then he decides that Michael was absolutely the one who ratted him out and blows up on him. Dude got expelled for what he pulled. Parents were furious at him and refused to pay for any more of his schooling. So now he's screwed out of getting to go to college, and there's no community colleges in the area he could go to for cheap while working because of the travel time. Getting to hear that the group member who almost made the rest of us fail and killed my personal pet project has pretty much his whole future plans ruined because of how he acted in our group felt sweet, like nothing else in the world has compared to. You reap what you sow. We absolutely hadn't intended to get him expelled. We just wanted him to fail the project and us to be graded for the work we did instead of taken down by him. Which also happened, I got an A. But I can't say that I was upset about the outcome. Good riddance, Keith. I hope you're cursing your lazy self to hell and back. Has anyone ever had a good experience with a group project? It seems like nobody in the history of the world has had a full group of people willing to do the work that they're supposed to. It's always one person in the group expects everyone else to do the work and they can just sit around and do nothing. Also, do you think that Keith got what he deserved, or was that a little bit too harsh? Let me know in the comments. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to give it a like and subscribe, and I will be back tomorrow with a new one.